Morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are calling from. We'll give you a couple more minutes for a few more people to kind of trickle in, and then we'll get started with the webinar. You should be able to see the screen. If not, please send me a note through the chat box. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So again, good morning to everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Digitize Your Brand Standards. My name is Tiffany Breevy and I'm a Global Marketing Manager with X-Rite Pantone, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. During the webinar, we will keep everyone muted. However, you will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. You will also receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. I would like to take this time to introduce the presenter of today's webinar, Bob Binder. Bob Binder has worked in the graphic arts industry since 1978, starting as a film stripper at a typesetting company. This job, which started out as a temporary part-time job, was the beginning of his lifelong passion about the printing industry. After obtaining a Bachelor of Science degree in printing management from Western Michigan University, Bob held several positions in the graphic arts industry, including management positions in labels and packaging. He joined X-Rite in 1999 as a member of the application support team. Since that time, he has held a number of positions, including application support specialist, trainer, customer support manager, and is currently working with customers as a solution architect, supporting a variety of X-Rite Pantone offerings, including Color Cert and PantoneLIVE. Now I'll hand it over to you, Bob.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. Well, welcome everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation here with an agenda just to discuss what we're going to cover today. As Tiffany mentioned, I have worked in the printing industry, both in labels and in folding carton. I've been with X-Rite for quite a number of years now in various support roles. I'm currently a solution architect. As such, I work with a lot of brands. So what we're talking about here today is very close to me. So I'm kind of excited with this, and hopefully I can bring some knowledge to you guys with some current products and offerings that we have that will make all of our lives easier. So what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to start out talking about something I'm calling the aspiration, what we'd like to achieve, and then move from that directly into some reality, because there are some limitations that confront us as we try to achieve our aspiration. And along with that, we have some new tools that will help you to get much closer to that goal that you want to achieve. A big part of that is something we call PantoneLIVE. I don't know if you're familiar with this. You may have heard it. What I find typically is there's a lot of people that have sort of heard about PantoneLIVE, but they don't really understand what it's all about. So part of what I'm going to do today is hopefully explain this in a way that makes sense. I'm going to mention something called Pantone simulator chips, which fit in with the PantoneLIVE structure. And then I'm going to do some live demonstrations to show how we put these tools into use. I'm going to do a demonstration of a product we have called the PantoneLIVE Visualizer. I'm going to follow that up with a demonstration using Adobe Illustrator and a plugin that we have for PantoneLIVE. And then I just will follow that up with talking about something we call Error Stack. and then I will open it up to questions, as many as we can get to. And as Tiffany mentioned, if you do have questions as we go through this, that's great. You can go ahead and there's a chat feature here where you can submit those questions. Okay, so with that, let's jump right in. So as I mentioned, I want to start out talking about the aspiration. And I think if we were to go to any brand owner and we were to ask, do you want your brand colors to match across all items? You know, I think the obvious answer is, well, yes, of course I do. And that's something that we all strive for, is to have consistent colors from one package to the next. And what I'm showing on here is, you know, a typical packaging situation. Here we have a coffee cup and a corresponding sleeve. The sleeve in this case is on a brown corrugated craft material. And hey, here comes the reality. The reality is it's not economically feasible to reproduce the same colors in both of these different conditions. And I'm going to say it that way. It's not economically feasible because there's things we could do, okay? We don't have to use brown craft for the sleeve. We could use white craft, would help. Could possibly print white ink behind the colors on the brown craft. Might help, although white ink is very expensive. To coat brown craft with white, you're probably not going to do it in one hit. You're probably going to take a couple hits of white in order to achieve a good base for the other colors. And that's all going to add up to high cost. So the reality comes in, and I've described it on this slide. I said the compromise involves the economies of a true match. And I assume that you guys have probably been in situations. I know in my portion of my career that I spent working in the print industry, especially in folding carton, because we typically printed everything we did on recycled paperboard. And the reality is we can only hit so many colors. The gamut of that space is somewhat limited. So when someone specifies a very chromatic, bright Pantone color, what we're actually able to achieve in that case is typically somewhat less than what's designed. And when we're on press for that initial press approval, it's a very stressful situation because we may not be printing what's desired by the brand owner or the art director, and that leads to a big disappointment, which is not fun for anybody. So what we have done is we've developed this product called PantoneLIVE. Now, PantoneLIVE is actually a couple of different things, and I've chosen to start out the explanation here by showing a traditional formula guide. Now, this is something that we're all familiar with, something that's been around for years, and very well adopted in the print community, and for very good reason. It's a nice physical guide. It allows the designer to flip through it, to find the color that they want, and it's a very good method of communicating color. The difficulty is that when we're printing on a substrate that differs from the formula guide, or using a ink system which is different, or a print process which is different, or the other thing that we commonly run into in packaging is what we would call fitness for use criteria for the pigments. In other words, if it's a product that comes in human contact, such as, you know, a coffee cup or similar type items, well, we can't use any type of pigments that could cause harm to humans. So we can't have any type of metals in those inks, types of solvents. It limits what we can use. There's oftentimes many other types of requirements, rub specifications, fade specifications, and every one of these specifications limits the number of pigments that we're able to use, which further reduces the gamut of colors that we're able to reproduce. The physical printed guides still serve an important role. It's easy to walk around and show someone a color. It's kind of nice just to have the ability to hold something in your hand. It doesn't require a calibrated monitor to the color that you're looking at. So not to diminish these at all, they still serve an important role. But PantoneLIVE allows us to do much more. And what we've done with PantoneLIVE, we have two different types of standards. And I've titled this particular slide PantoneLIVE Master Standards. So in the PantoneLIVE infrastructure, first of all, PantoneLIVE is digital data. It's not a physical printed guide. So I hope that this slide is not misleading in that direction. PantoneLIVE is digital standards, and we do have PantoneLIVE standards, which are digital data, digital versions of the Pantone formula guide. So there is a digital version of Pantone 185C red, standard of 485, and every single color in the formula guide, we have digital versions of those, and those are called PantoneLIVE Master Standards. But that's only part of it, and the part of PantoneLIVE that really makes it exciting is we now have what we call dependent standards, and a dependent standard are each one of those colors in the master library matched as close as they can be matched, various combinations of states, different printing processes, different ink systems, and when we make these standards, we also eliminate the use of those pigments that are commonly not used in packaging. We currently have a total of 28 different dependent standards, and we continue to add more all the time. And we additions based on feedback from customers. So as you start using PantoneLIVE, if you find that there's a certain combination of substrate and ink system or printing process that you commonly use that we don't have a dependent library for, please let us know, and we'll certainly consider that. Now, the way that we develop these dependent standards, and we actually partner with Sun Chemical to do that. You can see the little logo in the left-hand corner, little PantoneLIVE logo. And what we do when we want to develop a new dependent library, we actually match ink as close as we can, and again, using that particular substrate, print process, and ink system, and we match every single color in the formula guide. And so it gives us a whole series of these sets of digital data for different conditions. Because they are digital libraries, it's still nice to have a way to see a physical copy of that. And I will show you this again in just a moment, but we do have something called Pantone Simulator Prints, which is a physical print that you can purchase of these different or specific colors. It's not feasible economically to reproduce physical guides for each of these different dependent conditions. Again, we have currently 28 different libraries, and so to print 28 different versions of the formula guide it would just be cost prohibitive. So what we do have is the ability, if there's particular colors that you want to use on a project, you can order a sheet which contains peel off chips of that particular color, and these are matched specifically to that exact dependent library version of the Pantone color. And you will find that you will also get very accurate matches to these. These are reproduced digitally, and every color on every sheet is QC'd, and we actually place a sticker on the back of the sheet so that you can see exactly how close that reproduction is to the actual digital version. What we see in the simulator chip is you can have multiple rows that are the same color, or you can have every row a different color. The very right-hand patch that you see, which is slightly separated from the others, is a reproduction of the actual master version of that color. And the chips to the left of that are a simulation of how that color reproduces in the dependent condition that you specified. And then at the very top, we have include a lighting indicator, so that you know when you're looking at that sheet if you're truly under D50 lighting or not. Okay, so with that, I am going to move into the live version of this. So let me just go ahead and close the PowerPoint a second. And I'm going to start out by showing you the PantoneLIVE visualizer application. And this is a tool that we've created to help you in the design process. And the other nice thing about showing this is that I think it helps make it much more clear what exactly these different dependent libraries are. So I have a design that I'm going to be showing in a couple minutes in Adobe Illustrator. And this particular design has a couple of blue colors on it. So I'm going to go ahead and find these particular colors. And what we're looking at here, if you look at this list of colors on the left-hand side of the window, if you look at the top here, you can see this is identified as a master standard. Okay, so this is a digital version of all of the colors in the formula guide. If I scroll down here, I don't know how that's reacting coming through the webinar. I may have been moving a little bit too quick. But if I scroll down here, you can see we have all of the colors in the formula guide. I can search for colors here, and we have two blues. So let me go ahead and close Outlook there a second. Okay, we have two blues on this job, so we have 293. I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to select it. I can double-click it, and it moves it over here to my working palette. And the other color that we have on this particular item is 299 blue. So I'm going to find that and move that over to my working palette. I'm going to pull another color or two over here just so that we have a little bit more variety. Let me pull the red, and I'll pull over the medium yellow. So now I've pulled these four colors over to my working palette. And so the way that we envision this tool to be used is if we're working on a design and we're considering to use particular colors on a design, this is exactly what we'll do. We'll go in here and select those colors, move them over to the working palette. Now, if I click on them in the working palette, below that, what I can see is how each of these colors will appear in different printing conditions. And as I mentioned, there's 28 different libraries in total. I haven't downloaded all 28 of them for use, although I can. What I've done is I've downloaded some specific substrates and different print conditions that I'm considering for this project. So the first one you can see here, this is an offset printed carton on recycled carton board, and there's a little code there that we use to help identify this particular master library. You'll notice a number here. This is something called delta E. If you're not familiar with delta E is a number which indicates the total color difference between two particular colors. The larger the number, the greater the difference between the two colors. And the way delta E was originally set up, and this is a really rough rule of thumb, but just to kind of calibrate what your thinking is, it's generally considered that a delta E value of less than 1 is the number at which the average person would say they don't see a color difference. or at least not an objectionable difference. You know, I always have to be careful when I say that to a group of professionals like yourselves, because you're used to looking at colors every single day, and part of color viewing and understanding color difference is experience. So every one of you is going to see a difference between two colors at a delta of 1. But for the average person, that's kind of just to calibrate your expectations. So in this case, on recycled carton board, the delta is 1.7. So the average person would see a little difference there. And actually, I don't know how well this comes through on the webinar, because I know images do get compressed, but at least on my monitor, I can see a line of demarcation right here. And what that is, this area underneath the 1.7 is the actual master color, and the band of color to the left is showing me what this color looks like when reproduced under these conditions. And again, it's recycled carton board from an offset press. I've got some other examples here. Immediately below that is offset printed on virgin carton board. Now, you might automatically think that virgin carton board is going to look better, but you can't just make that assumption. It varies by different color. And in this case, this particular blue actually is a little bit worse than the virgin carton board. You can see we've got a delta of 3.2. Just a few other conditions here. This is flexo on white film. This is actually a very good match. We're 0.2. Nobody would find that objectionable. That would be a great match. This is flexo printed, this one right below it. This one's a little bit more complex. This is flexo printed with solvent-based ink, and it's reverse printed onto clear film, and then it's laminated to white film. Okay, that's a more complicated printing process, but it's actually a very common scenario. And so we did get a very good match there, 1.1. I threw this one in there, even though I know it's going to look bad, because it clearly demonstrates the PantoneLIVE dependent library situation. But this one is flexo printed with water-based ink on brown craft paper. Okay, so this is kind of coming back to the concept of the sleeve and the coffee cup. And this one is 14.1. Okay, that's a horrible match, but in that condition, it's realistic. So one of the things we can do with this tool is I can see right at this point, if I want to print on brown craft paper with this blue ink or this blue color, it's not going to look very good. It's not going to look very much like the blue that I really want. So I might want to start thinking of alternatives right away. To that end, I've also included a very similar library. This is also flexo printed with water-based ink, but this is white craft now instead of brown craft. And you can see there, it's still not great. I've got a delta of 8.2. However, versus the brown craft, it's much, much better. So at this point, I haven't started designing anything. I'm just looking at colors, all right? But I can see right away, I might have to start making some compromises. And maybe that's using white craft. Maybe I select a completely different color. And I can look at the different colors and that I've selected for my design here. And you can see here the light blue. Now on the recycled carton board, that's 4.1. That's not so great. The light blue, though, reproduces pretty well on the virgin carton board. That's 0.4. And on the white craft, it's 2.8. So, you know, if this was a real life situation, I'm thinking maybe I want to start looking at white craft instead of brown craft. It's going to cost more money, but it might be worth it. Similarly with the orange looks pretty good on the brown craft, and the yellow is probably, it's not horrible, but it's really looking like 3 out of 4 are better on the virgin board rather than the recycled. The recycled wasn't horrible, so I can start making decisions. Now, I'm also going to have to communicate this information, right? It's great that I can look at it here. So we've created a couple tools. One is, if I've decided, okay, I'm thinking of doing these colors, I can come up here and I can save this as what we call a dependent visualizer PDF. And I'm just going to give this a name here. I'll call it example. And from here, I can choose those different dependent libraries I want to reproduce. And I'll just go ahead and check all of them here so you can see this. And again, I've downloaded 6 different dependent libraries to this PantoneLIVE visualizer tool. If I wanted to, I could download all 28 of them that we currently have, but I'm going to use these 6, and I'm just going to save it right on my desktop. And what this does, this creates a PDF file for me, which I can then distribute. You know, if I'm a designer and I'm working for a brand owner, I may want to get their buy-in on what I'm doing. So I can, before I've even started designing, I can show them, okay, this is the colors I'm thinking of using, and this one happens to come out to 2 pages because I've chosen 4. But I have 4 different colors I'm thinking of using on this design, and here are the different conditions. Now, you have to know the code, but this first one here is the offset printed recycled board. What we're looking at here in each of these cases, the left-hand color swatch is the master standard, okay? This is Pantone 299C. So this is the color right out of the formula guide. The right-hand portion of the particular swatch is the dependent library. So LPEB, you have to kind of know which code is for which dependent library, but this is offset on the recycled board. Okay, immediately below that, we have the offset on the virgin board. So the brand owner can take a look at this and say, you know what, the virgin board is going to cost me a little bit more money, but to get this light blue that I really want, I'm willing to pay extra money. Or maybe I'm not willing to. Maybe I'm willing to work with this blue. Either way is fine, but the really nice thing is when we get to press, I'm not expecting the blue on the left and getting the blue on the right. I know right from the very beginning of the process what that color is going to look like when it comes off press. And we have the other ones here. The third one, this was flexo printed on white film. This fourth one here, this is also flexo, but it's reversed on clear film. This is the brown craft, and then the last one here is the white craft. So I can make this particular simulated PDF, and I can do this for as many different colors as I want and as many different dependent libraries as I want. This would probably be pretty typical of what we do for a single project. So this gives us a way to communicate this information to different stakeholders involved in a project. Of course, it definitely helps to have a calibrated display if you're viewing this, or if you're going to be printing this, to have a calibrated printer as well, so that we know we have a controlled environment. Another thing that we can do, and then I'll move into Illustrators, there's this icon here for simulator print. And if I click on that, that brings us directly to the Pantone website, which you can just simply navigate to this as well. But it's kind of handy if I'm right here. So I may say, you know, I've decided on these colors. I want to create this actual simulator print so I can build my sheet, and I can just fill this out. So the first row of chips, I want 293. And I'm going to use, now this does have all of them in there, but I'm going to come in here and choose, this is coated paper for a label, and it will start building this for me. Oops, and I lost my color, 293. And it will start building this sheet. So maybe the next row I want the same color, but I want a different print conditions. So here's the recycled paper board. I'm going to choose that. And so now this gives me, and you can see hopefully that the second row here to me it appears a little bit darker. This is on recycled paperboard. The first one is on coated paper. So it gives us realistic chips, again, to match to. So this is an advantage for the designer because the designer understands as they're making the design what it's going to look like. It's an advantage for the brand owner because the brand owner understands before they've committed to anything what those colors will look like reproduced in different conditions. And it's also a big advantage for the printer as well because the printer now has a realistic target to hit. So they're not struggling to do something on press that they're not able to do. And one other thing I'd just like to mention here before I move into Adobe Illustrator, and I'll try to keep moving along because I know that I've got limited time as well. But we had an interesting discussion the other day about accuracy versus consistency because we've had some printers come back to us, and it's sort of like we provide them this tool to help them understand an achievable color, so that when they go to their ink supplier, the ink supplier is not struggling. And the real issue, and I've seen this a lot on press in my career, is that when you're trying to achieve a target that you can't hit, you are forced to make a compromise. And not everybody is going to make the same compromise. So I may be in my print and I can't hit that dark blue. So I may think a little bit redder version of that blue is the best match. Someone in another print facility may think a little bit darker version of that blue is the best match. So we haven't, either one of us, necessarily done anything wrong, but when you compare my print to their print, it's going to be different. Whereas even, and the reason this came up is we've had a couple of printers come back and they say, well, I've got this special technique, I'm going to run to an extra high density. You can actually get closer to the original formula guide than your dependent standard, and they're very proud of that fact, and they probably should be. The problem is what we're doing is we're sacrificing, in that point, consistency for accuracy, and it's hard to say, hey, accuracy isn't the thing we're really looking for. But if we think about it, what we really want at the end of the day is for all of the packages on shelf to be consistent, so that you go from one size to another size, or one press run, or one converter to another, that we don't see a noticeable difference. So in this case, the PantoneLIVE dependent standards, when it gets to the converter, it allows us to have that consistency. Okay, and with that, I'm going to move into Adobe Illustrator because I want to show you some tools that we have for this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open up an image here. And all right, so let me zoom out a little bit more so you can see what we've got here. This is a pretty typical scenario. This is the two blues that I was using in the PantoneLIVE visualizer. Well, this has 4-color process for the bottle here, but this background here is made up of vignettes of 2 different colors, 2 different line colors. We have the 293 and the 299. Now, we've set this up in Illustrator just using the straight Pantone colors directly out of Illustrator. But we have a plug-in here which will allow us to actually use the PantoneLIVE dependent library. So I'm going to come up here to Window, PantoneLIVE, and there's some tools in here. But what I want to show you today is this option to replace color. So I'm going to open this up, and we bring this over here so we can see it. These are the colors in the job. So our typical things here. And you'll see we have a 293, a 299. Well, there's also a 1795. 1795 is only used in this little dot here in the AVT logo. So if this was real life, I'd probably use that out of CMYK. But in any event, what I want to do here is switch these colors out from what in essence is the master library color to the dependent library color. And with the PantoneLIVE plugin, I can do that. And the way I do so is I highlight the color here. You'll notice here I've got replace selected color by, and I'm going to choose a color from a library. And then you see I'll have a drop-down list here where I can choose my various PantoneLIVE libraries. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, now this is like a folding carton where like 6 of these little water bottles go into. So I'm going to choose white craft, okay? I've decided I'm going to pay a little bit more money and get the white craft instead of the brown craft. But I want to see in Illustrator what these colors look like. So I'm going to go in here and find 293, and then I'll click Replace Color. Now, you won't see the difference until I hit Done, but what you'll see here, the 293, it used to say, like these two, Pantone 293C, and it was a master version of this color. Now it's P293C, followed by FW White K. That's Flexo, water-based ink on white craft. So I'm going to replace the other two. So let me choose 299 and find that color and replace it. And I'll do the same with the red. So this is 1795. Replace. All right. So now I have all 3 of these replaced with the dependent version. Let me slide this out of the way and hit Done. Now, I'm going to hit Done, and in like, a half second or something, you'll see a shift in this image. You'll see the shift where I've noticed it primarily is in the light blue. So let me go ahead and do that. And so I don't know if you saw that. Again, coming through the WebEx is probably getting compressed. I can undo and redo this. So let me undo that. And you can watch for the shift. And then I can also redo it again. So there's a shift in the image when I do that. But what this is doing now, this is showing me what this carton will look like when reproduced under this particular condition. Another thing that we've included in the PantoneLIVE plugin is a viewer. And the reason that we've done this is, and this is the perfect scenario where I want to use this viewer, is that Adobe Illustrator does a great job of simulating process images, but it doesn't necessarily do a great job of simulating items made out of special line colors. So we've created a viewer which helps with this. So I'm going to go ahead and click Generate. So this will open up a secondary window, and it will give me a more accurate preview of these colors. So, and again, with the compressed image, I don't know how much you see. To me, on my display, this is pretty evident that it's different. A couple of things I see, the dark blue color here looks a little more chromatic. In the Illustrator version, it's a little bit grayer. And I'm also, in this screen tint here, these stripes are a screen of the dark blue over the light blue. And I'm losing a little bit of contrast. So this is helpful to me because what I might want to do, knowing that when I get to press, I'm going to lose a little contrast here, I may want to go open those stripes up just a little bit to kind of bring that back a little bit. So we've created these tools for Adobe Illustrator to help in the design process. And with that, I'm going to go back to the slides for just a moment and just wrap this up. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll open it up. But this is what we call an error stack. And what we get with physical standards, we have a master standard here, and if I supply this master standard to, in this case, 2 different printers, okay, and I'm being very careful. I'm actually not just relying on the Pantone guide. I'm providing a physical standard. So I've purchased Pantone chips, and I give 1 chip to one printer and 1 chip to another printer. Now, even though they're Pantone chips, there could be a slight difference. And here we're showing a 0.4 delta E for one and a 0.3 delta E for the other. Very, very close match, but slightly different. It says printer A here. So then he takes that physical swatch and he gives it to his ink vendor. His ink vendor matches it, and his match comes back at 0.5 delta E. A very good match. And then he goes to press, and he's able to reproduce within a range of 1.6 delta E to the ink swatch. Again, very good match. Printer B, he takes his swatch, he matches it. He's got a 0.7 delta E ink match, and he ultimately goes to press, and he's able to hit within 1.5 delta E to the ink match. Again, every one of these steps is well within tolerance, but when you look at the total accumulated difference between 2 different vendors, we now have a total difference of 4.5 delta E. So when we compare the printed sheet from printer A to printer B, there's quite a difference. However, with PantoneLIVE, we have 2 things going for us. First, we're matching digital standards, so there's no difference between the swatch that's given to one ink vendor versus another. They're identical. Because they're achievable matches, the ink vendor can do a much better job of hitting them. And the same thing with the printers, because now they're aiming for an achievable match. They're able to get a better match. And the result of that, when we compare one printer to another, and again, this is what I'm talking about, is consistency versus accuracy. This dependent library color that we start with is going to vary a little bit from the master standard, but because it's an achievable standard, the ink vendors and the printers are able to do a much better job of matching that. So while accuracy may be slightly different than what we want, our consistency is greatly improved. So with that, that kind of wraps up my portion, and I did go a couple minutes over, but hopefully you'll excuse me for that. So Tiffany, I don't know, do we have any questions that we need to address?
No, I'm looking here. I sent out a note to see if anyone had any questions that they wanted to ask. And just as a reminder, you guys can add them. Oh, okay, Kevin, you said you have a question. And if you want to type that in, you may go ahead and do that, and we'll try and answer that for you. Is there a way to show 2 different Pantone colors trapping on top of each other?
That is a good question. In this current tool, in the tool, in the Pantone simulator, we do not, but the way I would do that is in Adobe Illustrator, using the dependent library in combination with the viewer tool. That's the way I would do it. So I would do it inside of Adobe Illustrator. And I probably didn't mention this, but we do have, PantoneLIVE requires a license, and we do have a bundle that includes the PantoneLIVE visualizer, the plugin for Adobe Illustrator, as well as the PantoneLIVE license. And Tiffany, I don't know if you have the pricing off the top of your head. I think it's just under $100.
I think it's something like that, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's hopefully not cost prohibitive.
Okay. So we had a couple more come in too. So here's this question, Bob. Is it possible to use PantoneLIVE to standardize Pantone colors between CMYK inkjet printers from different vendors, i.e. Roland, LEF, inkjet, and InkCup X2?
Okay, it's another awesome question. Right now, today, we do not have any digital libraries, but we have had numerous requests for that. So we are working with the various inkjet manufacturers to manufacture them. It's a little bit different than the other libraries, because the other libraries, we have libraries for offset, for flexo, and for gravure printing. So they're all using conventional ink colors to do so. And as I mentioned, we partnered with Sun Chemical to help make all these ink matches and drawdowns for us. Digital is a little bit different because you've got standard ink sets, and you're using a combination of the rep and the particular printer to, in essence, manufacture various matches to the Pantone colors using CMYK or CMYK orange, green, violet, whatever combination you have. And so, but we are working on that. We don't have it at this time, but that is like the next thing we're working on. Exactly. So, yeah, great. I hope that's the direction of your question. I hit it right.
There's another one here. Is the license for one individual person / designer / workstation, or can it be shared within a department?
It's a license per workstation, but there are options for multiple ones. We do have site licenses available. There are two different licenses too, and let me mention this just so no one's confused. There is what we call a production PantoneLIVE license, and then there's a design PantoneLIVE license. The design license is much less expensive, and the design license works with the design tool. So Adobe Illustrator, the PantoneLIVE visualizer, it's designed for those. In fact, the visualizer doesn't really, it just requires you to have a license. So it would work with either one. So as long as you have a PantoneLIVE license on a workstation, you can use it. You can use the PantoneLIVE visualizer. The production license is for our quality control software. So that would be used with products like ColorSearch, IQC, our ink formulation software. Those QC type packages and formulation packages use the production license, which is a little bit more expensive. But for the design community, and it's not all that expensive. I think it's, and I could be wrong, but I think it's $98. It's right in that area anyhow. And like I said, there are, if it's a big group, there are site licenses available and discounts for multiple licenses.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'm not seeing any more questions here, and since we're kind of a little over time, but it was still a lot of valuable information. So, yeah, it looks like we don't have any more questions for today. I'd like to thank Bob for the thought-provoking webinar, and thank everyone else for attending today. If you have any other questions or would like to schedule a demo of some of those solutions that can help address some of the common issues addressed in this webinar, please contact us at any time. On behalf of X-Rite Pantone, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks, everyone. Bye.